Well, it's good to see everybody here. Welcome. It's nice to see a packed house. This is a really great view. So, Dr. Esolen, you're going to have a really good view tonight. So, it's going to be really good. So, I had the privilege just a few hours ago with a few other people in this room to hear Dr. Esolen speak at Aquinas College on Dante and freedom, and it was really phenomenal. So, we're in for a treat tonight. And he starts his, before he goes up, and he said, "No, Mark, this is a scholarly lecture. Tonight will be different." And he starts going, and he's cracking jokes, and I'm thinking, tonight's going to be really good. This is scholarly, so you set your bar high. So, what's that? Great. Yes, great. So he was gracious enough to come in this morning. He woke up at 4 o'clock to get to the airport, suffered what I learned he thinks is hell in Newark Airport, and picked him up at 11 o'clock in Grand Rapids, and we've got him pretty busy, so we're really thankful for you coming out. He hails from Rhode Island. He's a professor of English at Providence College, about 4,000 students there, some a little bigger than our Aquinas College here. He's also the senior editor of Touchtone, which I actually just learned of a couple months ago, actually, from a subscription I got of Dappled Things, and there was an advertisement there, and I've looked at it. It looks very good, so I'd highly recommend it. He writes for Magnificat, Crisis Magazine, and about every other good publication you see out there. So he's kind of a Chesterton wannabe, I think. I don't have to wait. No, that's true. That's very true. He's half the man. But if I eat those breakfast, that's right. That's right. That's right. So he's going to be, no kidding. He's going to be speaking tonight on wonder. An aspect of this book, 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child. So it should be really inspiring. I hope positive. It's a bit. It's obviously an intriguing title based on the crowd tonight. So on top of that, he's written numerous other books, including translating Dante, the entire comedy. So I have all three here, which he's going to sign afterwards because he's so nice. And we're in for a treat tonight. So, Dr. Esolen, let's welcome you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark, and oh my gosh. Can you all hear me back there? All the way back there? All right. I'm Italian, so if you can't hear my words, just look at my hands, right? So thank you all for coming out. I'm going to be speaking about the imagination here. It's the subject of a couple of my books. The book, 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child, now has a sequel, Life Under Compulsion, 10 Ways to Destroy Your Child's Humanity. Just in case television and school have not done a complete job of it, you can buy these books and make sure that your child will always be predictable, world without end. Amen. We say that we want to develop the imaginations of our children, but I think it's a lie. What we mainly want from our children is predictability, convenience, okay? Let me just suggest what it might be like if you had a real childhood. When I was writing these words first down that I'm delivering to you now, I was under a window in my house. And I could hear, by the way, I'm wearing my St. Louis Cardinals tie. Boo! I've been a fan since I was 8 years old, diehard Cardinals fan. But there was the cheerful call of a cardinal through the window and the barking of a dog and a blue sky with little white caps of clouds on it. And the branches of maybe the world's tallest pussy willow tree. It was supposed to be a bush. My wife planted it. It's about 30 feet high. Poised near the south side of my house. When I was writing these words for the first time, it was spring and the snow was melting. But there's something always, isn't there, about a sudden change in the season. I don't know, it happens to me, maybe it happens to somebody else, that it stirs memories. You had not been thinking about what it was like to be a little child. But a funny thing in the weather, a smell maybe, that's something that you can't even identify. And all at once, you're back, just for a few fleeting moments. And I'm a small boy sitting at the kitchen table at breakfast. My father is reading the morning paper. My father passed away when I was relatively young. It's been almost 25 years now. But there I am sitting at the kitchen table with him all over again. And he's reading the morning paper, darn it, because he's got the sports section and I don't. But I've taught myself to read backwards and upside down. So I am reading it, peering at the scores in the sports section, and there's the smell of burnt toast and butter and fried eggs and the sounds of birds. Names of birds I didn't know at the time that they're singing out there. The same songs that they're singing now, because the birds are the same. At that time, I didn't know their names. And then may come the gurgle of a woodpecker, and bang, I'm outside now, and I'm a little bit older, and I'm walking one of these old coal miner paths that crisscross the woods where I grew up. I'm walking there with my dog. We had abandoned mines where I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania. And that was one of the great blessings of having people around who didn't care a darn about the environment. They just left these big holes in the ground. And we boys didn't know. We called them canyons. I know now that they were strip mine holes. But they gathered, green water, and sometimes people back in the days before recycling and stuff, and people would drive their trucks up there with old appliances and just dump them into the holes or on the edge of the holes. So you think now you've got a 12-year-old boy and a 50-foot hole in the ground and a refrigerator at the edge. I mean, some things are just beyond our capacity to express gratitude to God for. There I'm walking with my dog, Collie, and snow melts very slowly up there, speckled with red buds from the trees, and sometimes your shoes crack through a crust of snow and there's mud and squelch underneath. It's a good world. I know I'm here to speak about what young people ought to be learning in order to bring to life that imagination, or rather, not to kill it. I also want to speak about the liberal arts, that is, the free-making arts, arts that are necessary for free and fully human society, why these are fading fast. And yet I will always want to be coming back to those scenes from my childhood for the elemental things, the real things in human life. So I think I should steal the words of Robert Frost and turn them to my purpose here. Something there is that does not love a school and wants it down. You know the poem I'm talking about? It's a poem called Mending Wall, about how he and his neighbor at the end of a frost, no pun intended, right? At the end of a thaw, the rocks and the rock walls that separate the properties come tumbling down because of ice, whatever. And they set a day and they go between them with the wall between them. They put the rocks back up. Some are about 100 pounds. They mend the wall. And the poet says, why do we do this? Something there is that does not love a wall and wants it down. Something in me, the boy in me, still to this day, although I've spent my whole life in schools, something there is that does not love a school and wants it down. Suppose you consider what's really important in a young person's life. Suppose you think that really important thing is going to be transacted inside the walls of a school. Well, if that's what you think, right, if you always are going back to the most important things are what's going to be happening within those walls, then my little anecdotes about what Hopkins called wind walks, silk sack clouds above me. Well, what is that? If school is not for a human being and his encounter with a world that's inexpressibly beautiful and mysterious, even if it's the rather shabby, ugly little place where I grew up, which was so dear to me and so beautiful. If school is not for that encounter with a world which he feels as a gift and honors with his gratitude and wonder, most especially for the beautiful mystery that we know as another human being, right, then what is school for? What can school possibly be for if not for that? By the way, another human being, I often tell my students, you can tell the madness of our own time by just going to a grocery store or drugstore and you look at the titles of the magazines that are on sale. Us, Self. Where's the magazine with the title, Somebody Else for a Change? Us. What is school for? The cardinal, the willow, the clouds, snow. What are they? What can they possibly be? A pleasant diversion from what is called real life? Meaningless distraction? Raw stuff to dominate and use? Is that what it is? If that's what it is, then we can't say, well, okay, well, that's as far as we'll go no farther. The utilitarian will not stop there. If that's what that stuff is, then other people will become that stuff too. Other people become pleasant diversions or meaningless distractions or raw stuff to dominate and use. Consider what they have been calling children all my adult life now. Without any sense of irony, without any sense of shame, they say, children are our most precious resource. Think about that for a second. Children are our most valuable deposit of tin. Children are our best producing oil well. It's a strange thing to say. Resource. Or the children become conscripted accessories to a crime, which is called a lifestyle. Children like a really nice finished basement or a timeshare in Cancun, something that you put onto the real thing, which is your life, whatever that is. Now, I used to believe, I guess I still do kind of, that unless people were born in wonder, as the old motto for a very famous humanities program once had it. How many people know what program I'm talking about here? In this audience, the motto of a famous humanities program was Nascantur in admiratione, let them be born in wonder. How many people know of it? Wow, that's a decent number. That's a decent number. There's the University of Kansas, okay? Integrated humanities program, phenomenal. Look it up online. It's one of the few good things that computers can do. These Catholic professors, 3 Catholic professors, would sit up in front of a bunch of students and merely talk about great art and poetry. They didn't even have a discussion with the kids. It's completely pedagogically incorrect. They didn't even talk to the kids. The kids just overheard their conversation. It's changed these kids' lives. Why? Some of them became Catholics. Some of them became even priests and nuns. It had to be shut down by the U of Kansas, which it was after about 15 years. Apparently, I was told by one of the graduates of this program who sent me the brochure that he received from it when he was a freshman, because the last professor of that program, the last of the 3, passed away about 6 or 7 years ago, and he gave it to me as a tribute. I don't even know the person. He said that, where was I going with that? I don't remember what he said. Never mind. Whatever it was. Any you had to be born in wonder, or you're not going to be born at all. In a way, that's true. All right. Aristotle, flat-footed philosopher, Aristotle himself says, wonder is the beginning of the love of wisdom. That is, wonder is the beginning of philosophy. He didn't mean wonder is the beginning of a degree in philosophy. He means wonder is the beginning of a love affair with wisdom, of being in love with wisdom and pursuing it. It's not without passion, this wonder. But it's hard to describe what the passion is. You hear a master play the lovely slow part, the adagio of Vivaldi's Lute Concerto in C major. Don't ask me to sing it. I'm not going to do that. But you hear it. You wouldn't recognize it immediately. Everybody in this room would recognize it immediately if we played it, and everybody would fall silent. is so sweet and so beautiful. And you forget yourself. You become for a moment, let's say, not a candidate for the presidency of the United States. You become a human being instead, right? You experience something that can only be experienced in your flesh as a sadness that is not sad, a joy that's not yet joy. Shakespeare knew this. Shakespeare always uses music as kind of a symbol of cosmic order and spiritual healing. I'm never merry when I hear sweet music, says Jessica to Lorenzo in The Merchant of Venice. They're newlyweds. Two young lovers lean out upon the balcony at night. They're looking at the stars, and there is, say, a Vivaldi lute concerto played in the background. And merry there doesn't mean happy. It means, silly, full of high spirits, in a rollicking good mood. I'm not in that mood when I hear sweet music, she says. The reason is, Lorenzo says, the reason is your spirits are attentive. For the touches of sweet harmony, his words, famous line, touches of sweet harmony, that stir our passions, also bring them to the tranquility of order. That's St. Augustine's definition of peace, tranquility of order. What if you never know the touches of sweet harmony? What if your education has neglected them or made them grotesque? Not the touches of sweet harmony, but the twists and strains of sour discord. What if everything you learn has to be subordinated to the sound and fury of ambition? Think about this. Isn't it strange that we evaluate schools according to how many of the students get into prestigious, dehumanizing tanks? I got into a really good such place, one of the Poison Ivy League schools. I didn't know it was such when I went there. As Princeton University. I tell my students, a little college in southern New Jersey where faith and reason go to die. Though it's better now than in some ways it's better now than it was when I was there. In some ways it's worse. Is that it? I mean, you define a good school by how many people get to go to that despiritualizing holding tank? Is that it? Is everything to be governed by some calibration of ambition? Be useful or die? The moneylender Shylock in The Merchant of Venice had commanded Jessica, that's his daughter, who was eloped with his Christian Lorenzo, he said, "Stop up the ears of my house against the drum and the vile squealing of the wry-necked fife." I don't know about the wry-necked fife, but if it was bagpipes, I could understand Shylock. How can you tell if bagpipes are out of tune? Does anyone know? Somebody's playing them. Anytime you get in Shakespeare someone who has a distaste for music, see it as a deep spiritual problem, okay? There's something that has not come to life in that human being yet. His descendant, Shylock's descendant, Scrooge, shuts the door of his counting house against the small children caroling, "God rest ye merry gentlemen." He who sings prays twice, said St. Augustine. And also, said St. Augustine, singing, cantare amantis est. In Latin, it's so terse and powerful. Singing is what the lover does. Singing is proper to the lover. Lovers sing. The cardinal outside my window was singing. God has blessed him with a clear and tuneful throat. To sing is not simply to speak. To read a poem is not simply to gather information. Isn't that great? What are you doing with your spare time? I'm gathering information. Why? It's information. Maybe to read a poem is not to gather information at all. To behold a beautiful landscape, to really behold it, is not to reckon up profitable ways to destroy it. By the way, that seems to be a rule in the United States. You name the street in the subdivision after the thing that was there before you built the subdivision, okay? Like Bubbling Creek Drive. Now bubbles underneath the pavement in a kind of sewer system. Lorenzo tells us what to think of people who judge all things according to some crass measure of usefulness, the utilitarian. He says, "The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are dull as night, and his affections dark as Erebus," classical name for the underworld. "Let no such man be trusted." Mark the music. Think of your typical politician. Can you imagine a politician just saying, what's most important in life is that friends can sit and have a nice conversation after dinner and maybe listen to sweet music. To believe that is to cease for a moment or two to be a politician and to return to the human race. If you have no music in your soul, I don't know what came about that. I'll tell you an anecdote about, you remind me, and I will tell you the craziest story about something like that happened when I was giving a speech, but you have to ask. Person without music in the soul is not born in wonder, but it doesn't mean he's not born. He might not be born in wonder, but he might be born in something else. Wonder is not the midwife, something else might be. And now let me suggest what that would be. What would it be? I'm asking, what rough beast hammers its way out of the shell of a school in which there's none of that double prayer, that is singing, none of the double singing, that is prayer, no love for beauty, simply because it is beautiful, no leisure to read a book, because the book is eloquent and wise, no honor given to the saints and sages and statesmen, however flawed they might have been, of the past, no humble deference to art, no understanding that all the week's working days are for the Sabbath, not the other way around, no boy lying on his back in the grass to look at the clouds because they are clouds, none of the free-making arts, but all things transformed into belts and levers and pipes and molds for the construction of workers. One single common curse for a nation that used to be free. If lust is the evil parody of married love, if slogans chanted at a political rally are the evil parody of prayer, what is the evil parody of wonder? We might not have one name for it, but I think Shakespeare can show us what it is. We see it at work in many of his plays. Shakespeare is not friendly to men who bustle about the world. My students are shocked when I tell them that the word ambition in English is a pejorative word until about the 20th century. And in its early uses, it's not only pejorative, it is a deadly insult. You remember Mark Antony. But Brutus says it's Marlon Brando being Mark Antony. You remember him on the steps of the Senate House. But Brutus says that Caesar was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable. When that the poor hath wept, Caesar hath bled. Ambition should be made of stronger stuff. But Brutus says that Caesar was ambitious, so sure, he's an honorable man. Sorry. No clap, no clap. Now, when you really have to clap, you have to ask me to be Satan. If you bustle about the world, you are a villain in Shakespeare. Richard III wants to kill off all the rivals to the throne and leave the world to me to bustle in. And he is about the most evil figure in the early Shakespeare. They bustle about the world, making quiet wonder impossible for everybody else. But I think it's in his finest romance of wonder, The Tempest, that he reveals the beast's face most clearly. Now, the funny thing is, you can't get a decent class in The Tempest anymore. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, it will be read as a political play about colonialism, despite the fact there are no colonies, okay? Imperialism, despite the fact that everybody on the island wants to go home, okay? To just destroy the play. Anyway, here's the situation in The Tempest. Who's read The Tempest here? Okay, it's about a quarter. All right. What's the matter with the rest of you? You haven't read your Shakespeare? I mean, you've got this great, amazingly great play, right? Now you have an assignment, right? So courtiers from Naples and Milan have washed up on the shore of what appears to be a deserted island in the Mediterranean. They include 3 men of sin: Alonso, the king of Naples, his brother Sebastian, and Antonio, who usurped the dukedom of Milan from his brother Prospero. Those 3 had conspired to supplant Prospero, the rightful duke, and to murder him and his infant daughter Miranda, but to do it on the sly because they knew that he was popular in Milan. They set the duke and a little baby girl. Oh my gosh. I mean, is this getting providential or what? She's a girl, right? It's a boy. He smiles. There we go. He does look like a boy. So they set the duke and a little baby girl, a little toddler girl, on a rotten boat, a rotten tub of a ship to drown at sea. But God has preserved Prospero and Miranda. And now after 12 years, these conspirators, survivors of an apparent shipwreck, are on the island where Prospero dwells. They don't know it. Prospero himself has arranged it by the use of his magic arts. So they are in his power. They don't yet know that. As they trudge along the heath, there is a good old man among them. It's not the 3 men of sin. There are other people there too. One of them is a good old counselor named Gonzalo. He's innocent. He's a close friend of the exiled Prospero. He's actually one who assisted in his own small way to save Prospero's life. He remarks upon wonders there. Every sailor to distant lands, he says, comes home with strange stories to tell. But, quote, for the miracle, I mean our preservation, few in millions can speak like us. He's trying to soothe the sorrow of King Alonso. The king believes that his son Ferdinand, very nice, very good, virtuous young man, he thinks that his son is dead, drowned, right? Drowned in a wreck. So Alonso is not yet ready to hear anything about wonders. Gonzalo sees in this island everything advantageous to life, he says. He marvels at how lush and lusty the grass looks. He observes something strange about their garments. They've been through the ocean, and yet they hold notwithstanding their freshness and glosses being rather new dyed than stained with salt water. He sees a place that could be like Eden, or like the mythical golden age of the pagans. And he imagines being the ruler of it, not because he's ambitious, but because he's peaceful. His rule is characterized by refraining from rule, says Gonzalo. All things in common nature should produce without sweat or endeavor. Treason, felony, sword, pike, knife, gun, or need of any engine would I not have. But nature should bring forth of its own kind all plenty, all abundance to feed my innocent people. At which the wicked Sebastian and Antonio smirk. Smirking is about the only laughter that you can hear in contemporary television, I think. They smirk. No marrying among his subjects? Asks Sebastian. None, man. All idle, says Antonio. Whores and knaves. Of course, Gonzalo daydreaming. We know painfully well how necessary law and order are. Sebastian and Antonio themselves are evidence. There can be no golden age so long as men of sin walk the earth. We know this. They are themselves the knaves that they see populating Gonzalo's imaginary kingdom. That fits well with everything else these men of sin see or do not see. They laugh at the notion that their salvation has been a miracle. We think, perhaps, that if only people who have no faith could be made witnesses of a miracle, that would just break them down. I'd say, well, of course then, there must be a God. This is a miracle. That's all. They don't see. They don't see the green grass. To their eye, it is tawny. Their garments, as they sense it, stink of fish and brine. Alonso is temporarily incapable of wonder because he's overwhelmed with grief. He can think only of his son Ferdinand. O thou mine heir of Naples and of Milan, what strange fish hath made his meal on thee? He'll also soon be feeling the sharp tooth of conscience. But Antonio and Sebastian, they're not feeling the tooth of conscience. They're peeved and frustrated. They're not sorrowful. Sebastian's comfort for his brother, the king, is to blame him for the shipwreck. Now, by this point in the play, we know that the island is actually far more wondrous than even Gonzalo suspects. We've seen the magician Prospero. We've heard his conversation with his lively spirit, Ariel. Ariel talks about how he flamed amazement on the stricken mariners. We know the ship was not wrecked. We know that not a hair perished. And that those words come directly from St. Paul. St. Paul's reassurance to the mariners in the Acts of the Apostles, one of the shipwrecks. We know that the young Ferdinand did not die, but is safe and sound on the island. And most wondrous of all, by this point in the play, we've seen the awakening of young love. More about that in a moment. Meantime, the spirit Ariel, by the way, the name is not feminine, it is masculine. It means Lion of God in Hebrew. Read Isaiah chapter 29. He enters the scene again as Shakespeare's stage direction has it. Shakespeare, very rare in stage directions. We get some notorious stage directions, maybe the most notorious one in the history of drama, Exit Pursued by a Bear in The Winter's Tale, and it's probably a bear. But Shakespeare's stage direction has it playing solemn music. We might say that music is just what the guilty Alonso needs, music that will soothe him to sleep and begin the process of his moral healing, the recovery of his moral imagination. Shakespeare often uses music in this way. When King Lear, called child changed, that is, he's lost his wits, but also he's become childlike. It's double meaning there at least. When he's brought to the tent of Cordelia, the kindly doctor orders both sleep and music. That's a prescription. When in The Winter's Tale, the innocent Queen Hermione is about to be returned to life, who's read The Winter's Tale? Many fewer. It's got the most amazing final scene in the history of drama, okay? When she is about to be returned to life, Paulina, acting the part of a magician and stage director, calls out, "Music, awake her, strike." But here in The Tempest, it doesn't at first appear that the men on the island hear the music at all. Gonzalo is the first to grow sleepy, then the rest of the entourage, finally King Alonso. They're all asleep. No one's awake, no one's standing, but these two who feel no wonder, Sebastian and Antonio. What a strange drowsiness oppresses them, says Sebastian. Antonio explains it away. It is the quality of the climate. It's the humidity. Now, we know it's not that. It's Ariel's music. And Sebastian and Antonio themselves admit if it was the climate, it doesn't seem to have any effect on them. I find not myself disposed to sleep, says Sebastian. Nor I, says Antonio. My spirits are nimble. Now, Gonzalo, eminently capable of wonder, is asleep. Alonso, who is being recuperated in this poem, is asleep. Sebastian and Antonio must believe that fools and idle dreamers are sleeping, while the real world we always hear of is bright-eyed and awake. The real world. I mean, what do the people in the real world do? Watch CNN news and play video games? I mean, is that it? What real world do our politicians inhabit? I don't want to be in that world, or whatever it is. And I'm not singling out any parties either. They can have it. Here we might expect Shakespeare to present us with all the clarity and strategy of the coldest Machiavellian, the sharp eye for the main chance. But he doesn't. This is very strange, what he does here. What he gives us penetrates into the disease of men who are not born in wonder. Okay? They're born in something else. He doesn't give us wide awake stuff. He gives us alternative dreams. And it's Antonio, who's the more wicked of the two, is the first dream. They fell together all as by consent. They dropped as by a thunderstroke. What might, worthy Sebastian? Oh, what might, no more. And yet methinks I see it in thy face, what thou shouldst be. The occasion speaks thee, and my strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head. I should have done it in mafia accents. I see a crown dropping upon thy head. Sebastian at first appears not to know what Antonio is getting at. What the hell are you talking about? Indeed, he accuses Antonio of being asleep. It's a sleepy language, and thou speakst out of thy sleep. What is it thou didst say? This is a strange repose to be asleep with eyes wide open. Standing, speaking, moving, yet so fast asleep. No, says Antonio, it's you, Sebastian. You who are nodding off. You're letting your fortunes fall asleep instead of seizing the opportunity. What opportunity? Kill your brother Alonso in his sleep. Antonio will kill Gonzalo, and Sebastian will be king of Naples. There's darkness when I'm talking about murder. That's very funny. What a sleep were this for your advancement, cries Antonio. Now, Sebastian has the rudiments of a conscience. He says to Antonio, I remember you did supplant your brother Prospero. So what, cries Antonio. What? What of conscience? Conscience is but a word that cowards use, cries the sleep-deprived dreamer Richard III in that play, invented first to keep the strong in awe. Our shields be our conscience, swords our law, says Richard. If conscience were a sore on my heel, says Antonio in this play, I'd wear slippers. So much for conscience. I feel not this deity in my bosom. So they draw their swords and they prepare themselves to put the king, Alonso, and Gonzalo to the perpetual wink. That is, the land of sleep, whence no one in this life returns. You see what takes the place of wonder? My gosh, if only it were being sluggish and insensible. We could deal with that. Antonio does not hear the music. He does not feel the pinch of guilt, but he does dream. Lady Macbeth walks in her sleep because she is desperate in her guilt. Antonio sleeps in his walk because he's beyond despair or beneath despair. She is beset with evil dreams of what she has done. Antonio blooms with evil dreams of what he's going to do. He walks with his eyes wide open into hell, like the witless beasts of the psalm. If wonder is the angel, what's the devil? If wonder is the elf, what is the orc? And Shakespeare shows us. It is the soul's fascination before the terrible vision of power, sheer power. Now I'm thinking again of that thing that's been visited upon us, the common curse. Visited upon a once free people of 300 million by a few men of immense power and wealth, narrow learning, little faith, and no wonder. And I ask the question that any sane man would ask, which is, why would you wish to do this? The wisest man in the ancient world, Socrates, called himself wise because he knew that he knew little. He never set himself up as the only instructor of Athenian youth. Why would any decent human being desire to intrude himself into the education of millions and millions of other people's children, overruling the parents, reducing them to serfs, those serfs with clean fingers, on a bureaucratic and technocratic manner? I look out the window again. Sun has declined well to the west, shines yellow on the twigs of the willow tree. To be capable of wonder is to be capable of the simple gladness of letting things be. I don't want a better willow. I don't want that ugly thing called a smarter planet. I don't want a planet at all. The song sparrows are enough. The ordinary duties and joys and sorrows of human life are more than enough. If anything in this life can be more than enough. So it comes to a fork in the road, as it seems to me. It was once possible for a lad with no particular bent towards poetry to find his well springs of wonder in the things that he did every day, in the earth he tilled or the house he built. That poet Hopkins, you all had an Authenticum on Gerard Manley Hopkins, right? He loved the things in the natural world, but his love was not confined only to the rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim. He loved also landscape, plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plow, and all trades, their gear and tackle and trim. Well, that is so no longer. Few of us are blessed with the humble corrective of good manual labor. Okay, we don't have a barn to raise, or cattle to tend, or grain to mill, clothes to sew and mend. We live within the padded cell of high technology. I'm not saying I want to raise a barn tomorrow, but there are losses too with this high technology. It's not easy to smell the grass in the good earth. Arts and letters remain. Good books are cheaper than ever, but our schools no longer teach the orderly beauty of grammar, much less something as complex and subtle as poetry. Our universities have abandoned the liberal arts or have wrenched them over to politics, where everything is like a bacchanal of the worship of unfettered power. At such a point, we have to either return to music and art and poetry for the sweet wisdom they can shower upon us, for their own sake. Not because we're aesthetes, but because we're human. Either that, or we join in the nightmare of what Malcolm Muggeridge called legend, noisy and shameless with all its bright lights and wealth and fame and debauchery and madness. Grace builds upon nature, not upon madness. Among people of past generations, books of wonder might have been the spice of life. I'm afraid for us they have to be antidotes. You can't avoid the poison is everywhere, and the poison is demonic. I'm not reading too much into Shakespeare here. The greatest genius in the history of literature knew that the dream of power was demonic. Now I'll cite a small part of the chapter of Isaiah from which Shakespeare derives his name Ariel, not from a cartoon mermaid. Derives the name in almost all of the major motifs of The Tempest, says the prophet, and it shall be at an instant suddenly. A visitation shall come from the Lord of hosts in thunder and with earthquake, and with a great noise of whirlwind and tempest, and with the flame of devouring fire. And the multitude of all nations that have fought against Ariel shall be as the dream of a vision by night, and all that have fought and besieged and prevailed against it. And as he that is hungry dreameth and eateth, but when he is awake his soul is empty. And as he that is thirsty dreameth and drinketh, and after he is awake is yet faint with thirst, and his soul is empty, so shall the multitude of all the Gentiles be that have fought against Mount Zion. I thirst, cried Jesus in agony from the cross. His was the thirst of love. And when they tried to give him drugged wine on a sponge to deaden his pain, he spat it out. Love never ends, says St. Paul. We might say that the thirst for power never ends. It's insatiable. Why did Antonio betray his brother? Prospero says that Antonio was dry for sway, dry, utterly thirsty for power. The drunken monster Caliban in the play will later conspire with two drunken castaways from the ship to kill Prospero and take over the island. Their drunkenness is sometimes slapstick and silly, sometimes merely subhuman, often malevolent. But the drunkenness of Antonio and of people, whatever their titles may be, who are fascinated by the cobra of power, that drunkenness is much more dangerous. They are far from wanting to let the willow and the cardinal be. They will not let man be. They will not stop at engineering our food. They'll engineer the feeding too, and then the feeders. They won't let boys be boys and girls be girls. When transgressing becomes a virtue, then ambition knows no bounds. But those imposed by greater power, power and not love, is the only thing that keeps demons in submission to other demons. And so we see why those who dream of power cannot endure the free-making arts, the liberal arts. Can't rest easy so long as some little boy somewhere in the world is wandering about the woods just being a kid, a boy, looking for birds' nests. It's why they must transmute the poem, whatever poem it may be, into what they call text, a chemical substance to analyze, while fighting your way to the heights of wealth and power. Is why what has become of the Girl Scouts demanded that all a girl's interests be evaluated in the light of a possible career. You cannot get your patch, it's actually true, my daughter went through this. Couldn't get your patch for astronomy by learning about the stars and gazing upon them in quiet wonder. And that is apparently one of the things at the University of Kansas that they did. They made the kids go outside at night and look at the constellations and learn which were which. Now, if you're a Girl Scout and you know where to find Jupiter, and that's Orion, that's not enough. Hey, that was not only not enough, it wasn't even necessary. The one thing needful was that you talk to a professional, a woman, about becoming an astronomer. People who will not hear the beauty of a poem may be worse than deaf. People who will not see the dignity of a child kneeling in prayer may be worse than blind. Their ears and eyes may be sharp indeed. Antonio's ears and eyes are sharp in the mad world of power that he inhabits. And there's another thing, and now it's the culminating thing, I suppose, of my talk tonight. There's another thing that the idolaters of power cannot endure. They can't leave it alone. It is also central to Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Prospero does not intend to kill his enemies. He does intend to return to his dukedom in Milan and to free Milan from the overlordship of Naples. The key to his plan is love. Ferdinand, the Prince of Naples, is not dead. He's alive, and he's on the island. And Miranda, Prospero's daughter, her very name, I believe, for the first time appearing in the Western world, invented by Shakespeare, means she who is worthy of wonder. Miranda is of marrying age, so Prospero brings them to an encounter. How so? By means of wonder. When we first see Ferdinand, He's following the music of Ariel. Ariel is singing a mysterious song about the quieting of the waves. But the youth doesn't know where that music is coming from. It seems to bring him a spiritual comfort. So he describes it. Where should this music be? In the air or the earth? Sounds no more. Sure, it waits upon some god of the island. Sitting on a bank, weeping again the king my father's wrack. He thinks his father is dead. This music crept by me on the waters, allaying both their fury and my passion with its sweet air. Thence I followed it, or it hath drawn me, rather. He believes that his father Alonso is dead, yet the music brings him a strange peace. It seemed to still the waters, and the waters of his soul. When it begins again, the words we hear suggest a death and a transformation that exceed the ordinary power of nature. They suggest a miracle. We hear the song. It's not clear that Ferdinand hears the precise words of this song, but we hear. Full fathom 5 thy father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. This is no mortal business, says Ferdinand. And it's just at this point, the dramatic union of the motifs of death, the changeless beauty of coral and pearl, the might of the sea, and a hint of miraculous change. This point that the most important event in the life of Ferdinand occurs. He sees Miranda, and Miranda sees him. I might call him a thing divine, says the girl, for nothing natural I ever saw so noble. She's lived on the deserted island with her father and the monster Caliban all her life. She's never seen a boy. But she's right. He's a man, not a spirit summoned up by her father, as she first supposed. But what is man? A human being, little less than the angels, says the psalmist. Made in the image of God, says the sacred author of Genesis. Not a monster ever thirsting for power. Not the raw material for the nightmare seekers of power to work upon. Miranda is right. So is Ferdinand when he addresses her. Most sure the goddess on whom these airs attend. Before he knows her name, he calls her by her name. Oh, you wonder. The encounter of a pure youth and a pure maiden. Of all the natural things in this sorry world of ours, that may be the single one that the demons hate the most. Milton seems to have picked this up from Shakespeare when he says, has Adam, the unfallen Adam, say to Eve, that may be conjugal love that excites the hatred of their enemy more than anything else. He's right. The plotting of Sebastian and Antonia will be foiled in this play, but politicians we will always have with us. They will live to dream again. And unless they repent of their ways and beg for the grace of God, they will dream their way into the nightmare called hell. Good books are our allies in the sweet cultivation of wonder, but even good books are not the end. The natural world about us, made by the hand of God, is a powerful ally. That world of mighty tempests and waves, and the tiny homely wonders of wildflower and berry and mushrooms that spring up by the light of the moon. But the natural world is not the end. The marriage of a Christian man and a Christian woman is from the beginning, as Jesus says, and is an image of the end, the kingdom of God, which Jesus says is as a wedding feast that a king gave for his son. That is why our educators must see to it that Ferdinand never meets Miranda, by making sure that there never will be a Ferdinand or a Miranda in the first place. They began by denying the goodness of the natural. They are now celebrating the evil of the unnatural. They got a bell tolling now. Mark must be paying these people. They are now celebrating the evil of the unnatural. Let's have a piece with the rest of the project. They began by disparaging the liberal arts. They now pervert them to ends that are crudely utilitarian or political. They began by worshiping nature as opposed to man. They proceed to ignore nature and to rob young people of the time and the opportunity merely to be outdoors. They now immerse those young people in the unnatural, giving them hideous pictures to burn like caustic acid into their memories. The Tempest ends with love born and love raised from the dead. The young love of Ferdinand and Miranda, and the genuine repentance of Alonso, who falls to his knees, a magnificent dramatic moment, falls to his knees before that girl whom he tried to murder to beg her forgiveness. Contemporary critics see none of it. They stand there like the cynical Antonio and Sebastian. Even Caliban the monster is reconciled to his master. But then Caliban, unlike the enforcers of the curse, Caliban always was capable of wonder. When his fellow conspirators were spooked by Ariel's music, Caliban reassured them in these words. He says, "Be not afeared." Well, I gotta have a monster's voice here. "The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about my ears, and sometimes voices that if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again." It's a sorry time when Caliban shines as an exemplar of humanity. If we are to raise up human beings from which the Lord may make saints, you can't let our managers stifle the wonder in us. Surely a Catholic education can be at least as poetic as that misshapen thing of darkness, Caliban, on an unknown isle. And that is my challenge to you at the Sacred Heart Academy and to your projects as you educate your children. Let them be born in wonder. So that's it. Right? Now we have time for questions, right?
Yes.
We have plenty of time.
So raise your hand. You're going to use the mic, and let's keep them brief. So maybe we can get a few other questions in. So, Paul, the man who brought the beer. So that little keggy thing over there is from Paul from Detroit. Yeah, praise the Lord.
Professor Esolen, thank you so much for speaking to us. In the places you've traveled, where are people who are living out Christian community and doing all the things you just told us to do?
Where are they? They're there. They may be here. Okay. I say the things I say, and at a lot of places where I go, they don't strike people as entirely new. It's a confirmation of everything that they have believed, or a way of maybe reinforcing what they've already believed, or encouraging them to continue in what they are doing, or to deepen what they're doing. This is not confined to Roman Catholics by any stretch of the imagination. I see evangelical groups recovering what you would call Catholic literature, and understanding that without this, without music and the arts, without this, they will be severely hampered in any attempt they have to bring people to Christ. Because they understand, although they might not have the philosophical scaffolding for expressing the idea, that all these things are natural to mankind. They were meant for mankind. God never made man to be without poetry, for instance. That's a strange situation. Every single culture on the face of the earth that we know anything about has had poetry. And they pass on their poems, their beloved songs from one generation to the next over hundreds of years, except for us, right? I mean, it's something that's deeply human. So there's a growing recognition of this among homeschoolers. There are places, either elementary schools, high schools, and sometimes little startup colleges, where this vision rules. And now I have light again. And they are Catholic schools like Our Lady Seat of Wisdom in Barry's Bay, Ontario. Yes, you know it. And the Tory Honors Institute at Biola University, and Patrick Henry College, which is deeply political, but I've been to Patrick Henry College 4 times, okay? I could probably not get a job at Patrick Henry College because the statement of faith has the little word only in it when we're talking about sources of authority for what we believe about in the Christian faith. It's the little word only is only scripture, and I'm a Catholic, I can't by the word only. And yet, I have most favored Catholic status among them. And these kids study Latin and Greek, and they're reading Dante. You're more likely to be reading Dante, by far more likely to be reading Catholic literature at Patrick Henry College, where almost everybody's evangelical Christian. And by the way, they wipe the floor with Harvard students. These kids are like, they're genius kids. More likely to read Dante there than at Holy Cross, or at DePaul, or at other supposedly Catholic schools across the country. So I really see great hope. These, you know what it's like? It's like the last 50 years, educationally and artistically, and maybe liturgically, we could get into an argument about that. It's been like blacktop, okay? And maybe there was a time when people thought that blacktop was pretty. It certainly is uniform, you know? You know what to expect with blacktop. There's a wonderful thing about blacktop. It doesn't last. And little bits of natural things like dust and ice collect in little cracks in the blacktop, and before you know it, you've got a little healthy seedling putting down its roots in dust in a crack in the blacktop. And in any battle between what's natural and sweet and good versus what's unnatural, okay, my bet is on the natural and good every time. The grass will defeat the blacktop, okay? So I wish there were 500 of these types of gatherings for every one that there is now, okay? But 15 years ago, there wasn't even this, right? I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I wasn't getting invited any place to talk about Dante. And Patrick Henry College didn't exist. Our Lady Seat of Wisdom didn't exist. Thomas More College in New Hampshire, I'm not sure when they existed, but a lot of things that are now in place are, you know, that people have said, hey, what the heck have we been doing all this time? And let's start having some fun again. I mean, let's actually sing songs. How about that? And read poems and love, right? So I see it multiplying. I don't know if the leaders of my church see it multiplying, but I don't know. Anyway, but they are. More questions. Somebody's got to ask me a question about weird things that happen while I'm talking.
Thank you. So I'm in a book club with a bunch of ladies within a block of me.
Okay.
And
wow, that's interesting. People on a block who know each other's names.
Yes, it's awesome. It's really awesome.
Are you sure that you have American citizenship?
Well, 3 are adopted from Africa. But they tend to pick these tearjerkers and people dying and such.
Well,
and so
I mean, there are great novels in which people die.
It's true. Nonetheless. My bigger question would be, so a lot of them are in education professionally.
Uh-oh.
I know. So, and they're great people, and they believe in it, you know, so they're dedicated to this system. And then I'd like to try to get them to read one of these 2 books for one of our picks. I'm thinking I've got Life Under Compulsion and 10 Ways.
Well, you can bribe them this way. You can say to them that they're free to email me any question at any time. And I will promise to answer.
Oh, that's wonderful.
about that?
Thank you. Do you think, how could you approach people who are so heartfeltly committed to the system in a way that doesn't make them feel like so defensive that they just don't accept any of it?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things that I'm starting to see from my students, I've talked about this several times in the last 24 hours here elsewhere. It's one of the sweetest things when it comes to the liberal arts, something that gives immediate enjoyment, but of a very complex kind, and something that continually gives more and more, is poetry. Okay? I mean, look, you can read one of the greatest poems ever written in 2 minutes. It's a short religious lyric by George Herbert. I mean, you could have Simone Weil, the Jewish would-be Catholic mystic, kept a poem in English by George Herbert on her person at all times. It defined her life. It's the final poem in his book, The Temple. It's a Eucharistic poem. It's an absolutely flat-out brilliant poem. There's not a single word in it that is at all difficult. It's all simple words. Your kid could read it. Your 10-year-old kid could read it. Wouldn't understand most of it, but could read every word. But I'm finding out from my students that poetry has basically vanished from the schools. It's gone. And instead what you should get are 20th century dystopian literature, young adult fiction, right, this stuff. Basically 20th century creepy crawlies, plus a couple of Shakespeare plays. The couple of Shakespeare plays function as an inoculation. That is, you get exposed to half-dead Shakespeare virus, and it keeps you from ever loving Shakespeare again your whole life long. It would be much better if they didn't do that at all, because the kids have no linguistic preparation for it and no cultural or historical preparation for it. They've not been reading English poetry, so the language strikes them as completely bizarre, right? And they have no historical place to put it, so they don't know what's going on. All they know is that they're supposed to like it, and if you tell teenagers that they're supposed to like anything, they'll hate it. And that's what they have. And so my students, and these are honor students too, not just ordinary run-of-the-mill students at Providence College, but the best. I say to them, freshmen, right? I want to know about your high school English classes, what you read for literature. I'm going to give you the names of some English writers. I want you to tell me if you recognize the name. You don't tell me anything about the person, just recognize the name. Milton, no name recognition. Tennyson, everybody read Tennyson back in the day. No name recognition. Laura Ingalls, okay? When she was a teenage girl in whatever crazy place she was living where nobody lives, South Dakota, was given as a birthday present a collection of the poems of Alfred Lord Tennyson, which Ma Ingalls had hidden underneath the clothes in one of the drawers. I mean, think about that for a second, okay? That would have been in the 1880s. They never even heard the name. Sometimes I meet students that never heard the name of Chaucer. Never heard the name. So, I mean, this is completely abandoned, right? Now, you got to be careful, because the poetry can't be too immediately off-putting. I don't think you start off somebody with Hopkins, okay? It's too tough. But you might want to try starting them off with Herbert. 17th century, but absolutely crystal clear. You might want to start off with some poems by Wordsworth, by Tennyson. Poems. Doesn't take long to read, so they have no excuse. Oh, I couldn't get through it. It's 50 lines long. And that might be a foot in the door. What could they say? I don't want to read poetry. It makes me break out in hives. Well, that's foolish. You know what that's like? It's like saying, I don't want to go to the Sistine Chapel. Every time I see great paintings, I break out in hives. I just can't deal with it. You're nuts. I mean, that's to be completely nuts, right? No, please, please, please keep that Vivaldi away. Make it go away. Make it stop. That's just nuts. They're afraid of it because it may challenge their opinion of themselves. Come out, and look, this poetry was written for a rather wide audience. It wasn't written for a couple of college professors. There weren't even courses in English literature until the turn of the 1900s. So these are people writing in order, among other things, to make money. They wanted people to read the poems, and people did read the poems. I tell you an anecdote, all right? And you can throw this at them and say, listen, you don't want to be, you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of a linebacker, okay? There's a guy who used to be on TV a lot back in the 50s. He was a college professor and a poet named Louis Untermeyer, okay? Louis Untermeyer. He's on the old What's My Line show from 1951. And Louis Untermeyer wrote a book called Paths to Poetry. It's a wonderful book. It's also like Paths to Poetry is about 1950. And he tries to address the charge at the beginning of the book, not poetry is too hard, but poetry's for sissies, right? And that's just nonsense. Look at some of the poets. Look at what they were like. And it tells an interesting story about a class in which the students were asked to commit a poem to memory and to perform it, to recite it in front of the class. And then the teacher would pick somebody else in the class to evaluate the performance. And one of the kids picked a poem called, which I'm not going to remember the title, it's Gray's Elegy on looking at the boys in the schoolyard of Eton School, and they're playing football. Gray says, it's a kind of a sad poem. It's a bittersweet poem because he says these boys, they have their boyhood now. It will not last. They will grow up. They will meet all of the disappointments in life. They will, perhaps some of them go into the service and meet an early death. But it's best not to tell them that now. Because, and the poem ends with the famous lines, and you will all have heard one of these lines, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Okay? So the kid in the class recites this poem, and the teacher points to a linebacker on the football team. And he says, okay, Joey, what'd you think of the poem and the recital? And Joey says, I think it was very fine. He says, I have nothing to say. It is my favorite poem in the world, and I have nothing to say. So you tell them that anecdote and say, come on. If a linebacker in 1950 can be so moved to the core of his being by an 18th century poem, then I think you can probably deal with a poem too, after all. You're a teacher. What the heck?
We're a little late on time. We just want to finish our.
Why, are we going somewhere?
We're not going anywhere. One more. All right. Greg. I think he's Italian.
I was wondering if you ever had anything strange happen during one of your talks. Like the lights go on and off or something like that. Could you share any type of stories?
Oh, it was very strange. This happened about, almost 20 years ago now. I was at Providence College, and it's a Catholic college. We're a Dominican college in Rhode Island. And this was family day. So this was the day when the parents would show up of the students who were enrolled at Providence College. So parents of freshmen are coming in, okay? This will be in the fall. And so it's a big happy time. These are not parents of prospective students. These are parents of students who are already there. So we would put on examples of our Western civilization lectures for the parents to listen to. And I said, well, I will take one of these lectures. So I have a hall of about as many people as are here now to hear a lecture on Virgil's Aeneid and the virtue of hope, okay? And this is planned to be about a 45, 50-minute lecture of the sort that I actually gave to my students. And I proceed to tell them what's going on in Virgil, that he's combating the materialism of his predecessor Lucretius, and his great hope for something like peace and chance for happiness in the world is the virtue of pietas, this duty to your father and your ancestors, generally speaking, and your fatherland, the patria, your country, and to the household gods and the great gods. And also, Virgil expands the virtue to include mercy, pity for suffering mankind, okay? And then I show, methodically, going through the poem, 45 minutes, that every single hope that Aeneas, the hero, has in the Aeneid is destroyed, comes to nothing. Comes to nothing. The great climax of the poem has him kill a young guy whom we're sympathetic to. And piety seems to lead him to spare him, but piety also seems to lead him to kill him. And he's at an impasse. And he flies into a rage and kills the young guy. And it ends like that. These are 45 minutes. And I say, well, now you will say to me, so where's the hope? Did you do that on purpose? Does somebody have a Bible here? No, I'm serious. Somebody have a Bible? We got a Bible? Oh my gosh, I know I'm talking to Catholics. There's not a single Bible in the room. I said to them, so you ask, where's the hope? Bring me Revelation chapter 21. Yeah. I said, where's the hope? I said, what'd you think? There is no hope. This is paganism. All paganism ends in despair. Paganism in the ancient world ended in despair, and paganism in our world ends in despair. It must. You want hope? I'll show you where to find hope. And I took out my Bible. I took out the Bible, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And there must have been something going on at St. Pius's across the street, because as soon as I read the first word, bells started to ring. Okay? The belfry bell. And I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth was gone, the bell is told. And the sea is now no more. And I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. And they shall be his people. And God himself with them shall be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And death shall be no more, nor mourning, nor crying, nor sorrow shall be any more, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat on the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And as soon as I finished the sentence with new, the bell stopped. It was the strangest thing. There was dead silence for a moment or two, and then one of the fathers said, you planned that.
We're not that elaborate.
Yeah, there must be some sinners here. I mean, it didn't come on when I was reading from Revelation, but this was pretty impressive in its own right, huh?
That priest gave us a call, and we thought we'd try
Okay.
something. But we're going to do one more if we could keep it brief, and then
Yeah, okay.
Dr.
You're asking
Esolen
an
will be-
Italian to keep things brief.
I know, it's
Okay.
really tough, I know. But he's going to be around, so feel free to ask him questions when we're done. But
Thank you. Hi.
First of all, you look like Tony Danza. I can't like shake that.
Somebody else said that. Wait. You think I talk a little bit like Tony Danza?
Every time you were doing that,
Alex,
it just.
come on, Alex. Please.
I just kept trying to shake "Who's the Boss" from my head as I'm trying to listen to you speak. It was difficult. And unfortunately, I haven't read your books, which now I'm going to pick up, courtesy of my table mate here introducing me to them. But we have a 3 and a 10-year-old. Our 10-year-old is first year CEC, doing the classical education here, which he's
It's
reading
terrific,
the Aeneid.
Yeah.
And just terrific, wonderful things. Can't say enough good things about Sacred Heart. But what are tangible ways that we can actually not destroy? And I don't know if this is covered in your book, because my husband and I just try to actively keep them children as long as possible, by letting them just be and letting them see the wonder in creation and all that. So what is
You have
tangible?
one enormous ally, a natural ally, and that's creation, okay? Stuff outside, right? I mean, you really can't go far wrong. Stuff outside. So, they wander outside, they might get into trouble. Well, of course they might get into trouble. What else is being a kid and being outside for if not to get into some kind of trouble? But that's a natural ally, okay? And then, it doesn't, much of this is merely resolving to refrain from doing stupid or bad things, right? So, I mean, let's suppose that somebody has been eating arsenic in his supper for the last few months, little bits of it, but it's been giving him a bellyache, okay? You don't have to come up with a complete diet to bring him back to health. The first order of business is to stop serving arsenic, okay? Much of what we're talking about here is merely recovering a kind of natural health. So the arsenic, it's unnatural stuff, I mean, it comes from without. That can be provided by the media. Almost everything that you will see on television is arsenic. Maybe some other influences like that, right? We don't do that. And the kid might feel deprived for a little bit, but after a while, I think it will feel as liberating. Oh my gosh. I mean, I actually don't have to pretend that I want to watch something I don't really like. I don't want to have to stare at the television because I don't have any imagination. I can't figure out what else to do. I'd be liberated from those things. So a lot of it is just resolving, we're not going to serve arsenic. And then you throw them outside. But you have other allies, right? Art, in general, is an ally. Good books are an ally. They don't have to be the great books. You don't have to have your 9-year-old read Crime and Punishment. You can't read Crime and Punishment. But your 9-year-old can read The Wind in the Willows, okay? John Sr. has a list of the 1,000 good books. He didn't mean the great books. Some of them are great, but all of them are good. And he has them categorized according to type and according to age, appropriate for the littlest kids and later kids. Throw good books at him. Throw a musical instrument at him. Aim it well, You get the double benefit of a bump on the head and a musical instrument. Go hunting. Go outside. Just do stuff. Sing. People used to sing. I give you another anecdote, okay? As not an anecdote, but it's just something that reveals something to me that's astonishing when you think about it. I'm in a junk shop in Canada, and that's where we spend our summers in Cape Breton in Canada, me and my family. And I see a little pamphlet-type book. It's falling apart. It's obviously been used to death. You can't turn a page. The pages fall apart. It's called Community Sing book. And it was published around 1910. And the foreword to the book says that there's nothing that brings people in a community together more powerfully than song. And so this is a community sing book. Apparently there were such things. And there in that book, see, the songs are scored for the singers who would be singing. Sometimes it's just women, sometimes it's just men, you know. But in general, they're scored for 4-part singing. You know, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So you have the boys singing soprano with some of the women singing alto. You got tenors and you got, you know, bass. And what's in there? Canadian patriotic anthems. Maple Leaf Forever, Oh Canada, with the words not Bowdlerized, the real Christian lyrics to Oh Canada. You got love songs from various places too, Juanita, Aloha Oi, I mean, they come from all places. You got silly songs, like The Capital Ship, you know, just nonsense songs, fun songs. You got sweet, sorrowful songs. Dvorak is in there, okay? Stephen Foster is in there. Handel is in there. He sing the Anvil chorus. You know? You got religious hymns in there. Now, I look upon that, and I see that the book is falling apart. And I say, I don't know that world. That world, I almost don't know the people in that world, because I've never met them. But that's the natural thing. That's what people always have done. We're the weirdos for not doing, you know. Recover all kinds of natural and good things. They're all over the place, and they're fun. They're a heck of a lot more fun than watching, for the third time, reruns of Fiends, you know, the pseudo-comedy of the young people in the city. I got the title wrong. Fiends. They fornicate and they crack jokes that are not funny, and you know what I'm talking about? I saw 5 minutes of it once while I was waiting for a baseball game. So, but those things will help, I hope.